Good morning, and thank you all for joining us this morning. We are very excited this week with Freedom Ohio. We've had a great week on our campaign, and with additional endorsements and key people coming on board. We've had a great couple of months here too, building momentum with endorsements from unions and other organizations, community groups. But I am especially pleased this morning to be with you to announce that Josh and Steve Snyder-Hill are joining the campaign for the Freedom to Marry in Ohio and are going to be with us in the fight to get discrimination out of our Ohio Constitution. And let me tell you, if you're going to be in a fight, if you're going to be in a battle, if you're going to be in a campaign, these are two men that I want to have with us. Yeah, they have been tested. Their relationship was tested during their separation, during deployment to Iraq and waiting to come home. That was definitely a test of character and a test of that relationship that few of us have to go through. They were tested again, staying the course, even though booed by a crowd at a presidential debate, and not deterred by that, staying with it, hoping to make sure that everyone, every citizen in our country, regardless of their sexual orientation, is treated fairly and equally. And I was so pleased to be with them when they petitioned the probate court to have their name legally changed, and refused to do the lie of convenience, to put down something else that was suggested to them, might make it easier for the court to grant their request, and put the real reason that they wanted that name change to reflect their relationship and their status as a loving couple that is married to each other. I think that shows a lot of character and conviction and courage. So I know that this is a great addition to our campaign here, and I am very proud today to bring them forward, Josh and Steve.
Joe, and on behalf of Josh and I, we are pleased to accept this invitation to be on the steering committee for Freedom to Marry Ohio. Just in short, I've been in the military for 24 years of my life, fighting for everybody else's freedom except my own. I think that this past year we've gone through quite a bit of different things, and Josh and I decided to get married on my leave from Iraq. So we came home, and I was on leave, and we had to leave our home state and drive to Washington, D.C. and ask for a waiver because I couldn't do it within the time frame that I had to be home from Iraq. So we asked for the waiver. We received the waiver. We drove to Washington, D.C. We got married at the grave of Leonard Matlovich, which was one of the first people that ever fought to be in the military, to be openly gay. And Josh and I were married, and we came back home, and I went back to Iraq, and then you saw what happened on TV because people had threatened to take away my right to be in Iraq. And since I had married Josh, it was a threat to be able to lose my retirement in the military, and I just didn't think that that was right. That's why I asked that question. Josh and I are part of a federal lawsuit now because we think that same-sex couples that are legally married in their states should receive the same benefits as our counterparts that are serving their country just the same way we are. And it just makes complete sense for us, if we're going to fight this nationally, to come back home and fight it here as well.
I'm Joshua Snyder-Hill. I want to thank former Congresswoman Mary Jo Kilroy and everybody for being here. So, we're of course very excited to be co-chairs on the steering committee. And I want to thank everybody, especially Stephen and any active duty members, as well as, of course, any veterans that are out there. Over a year ago, Stephen had just returned from Iraq, and it's different. It's difficult. You don't really understand what it's like. Your grandparents tell you fun stories when you're, your kid sitting on their shoulder, and you can appreciate it. But you kind of hear the stuff that is maybe more fun and has a little bit more light to glean. The reality is when somebody's gone for a year and you're talking with them on Skype, and multiple times a mortar goes off, and you have to disconnect. There's a concern, no matter who you are, whether you're straight or gay, if your spouse, family member, a grandpa, a grandma, a kid, the reality is what's the next call going to be? Is it going to be the Red Cross? Is Skype going to ring back? Is it going to be a family member? And I think the hardest thing that I realized, and the reason why we got married when Stephen got back from Iraq on his leave, was I didn't know who was going to call me, because there's no way that he could proclaim me as husband. There's nothing he could do, and I didn't know who was going to give me the call. I couldn't call anybody to I don't know, talk about what had happened. I couldn't call his parents and ask them, you know, to kind of talk me through this, because I didn't want to make them aware that he had been cut off by Skype, and that the next call that they may get, it could be the worst news possible. So that's why we did this case. That's why we're fighting, you know, against the DoD, to make sure that LGBT family members and spouses who serve can be aware of that. If somebody's at home taking care of the family, taking care of the kids, that they can be assured that they're notified right off the bat, and not hearing secondhand and having to wait and hear it from somebody else. And it only made sense, obviously. We're here in Ohio. We got married in D.C. because it just felt right to us. But we want our home state to recognize our marriage. That's why we went to the courts to change our names. That's why we refused to lie about it. We said that we knew our marriage wasn't recognized right now, but we recognized it, and that's why we wanted to change our names. So this made a lot of sense. It was perfect for us, and we're very happy to support this.
What is your status now?
I am still actively in the military, and I'm going to pursue my career and go all the way through. I was just actually promoted to a major, so I'm very proud of that. And I'm going to keep up the fight. The military has been very supportive of everything that I've done, because it's been a good story. It shows that gay soldiers are no different than straight soldiers, and we can do just as good of a job. And they're forbidden to give us the benefits because of DOMA, so that's why we're fighting this. That's why we're on this fight. The military wants to extend the benefits if they could, but they're not allowed by federal law.
And could you talk a little bit about, you know, I mean, exactly what you have done in the military? I mean, we're talking about combat situations, and
sure.
and your elbow to elbow with straight guys, and what that's been like over the years.
You know, it's an interesting thing. I went in high school, so it's been over 24 years. I was one of the first people that went to Iraq originally in Desert Storm. So we were the first people over there, and ironically, I was one of the last people out in 2010. So we shut down, we were part of the people that shut down the military. So I've had a really long span of 20 years with my service to Iraq. And you know, so many times in Desert Storm, I remember that I used to be in artillery, so I would be driving a track, and I remember that it's one of the terms in my life when I came to terms with my actual homosexuality, is that I was sitting there, and it wasn't a mortar, it was an actual artillery round that hit on the left side, and then it hit on the right side, and it meant they were homing in on you. And I remember thinking, this is it, because this is something that's going to happen to us. And I looked in my track where I had a picture of my family, and I had my brother and his girlfriend that were in this picture. And that's when I really came to terms with the fact that I've never lived my life honestly or openly. I've always had to lie about it. I came to terms with myself thinking that this was it. And so I vowed at that moment that I was never going to lie about who I was again, and basically didn't. I came out in my personal life, but I always had to lie to the military. I've had to go through my house. What Mr. Santorum does not know is that this is not about sex. There was no question about sex. The question was, I would go through my own house and I would hide pictures of us on vacations, because military people, my friends, would come over and visit. And that's how invasive Don't Ask, Don't Tell was to us. It wasn't anything about treating anybody differently in the military. Everything's professional. We do everything professional. My soldiers have been so supportive of me. The military itself, their PAO came to me and said, you know, after he heard the story and heard the stuff that I've gone through and hiding pictures, he said, you know, I think that you should tell your story. People should understand what this was like to serve under. And I think that we've done a really good job. People are starting to get that. America's on the right side of history. Ohio now is on the right side of history, that we're deciding not to treat people like second-class citizens. And I think that we're just now realizing that we're only halfway there. That if something had happened to me or Josh while I was in Iraq, I might not have been able to go home and bury him if he had been in a car wreck, because he's considered a friend. And that is just so not respectful of the people that have given our lives to our country. Everybody sacrifices a lot when we serve our country. Gay people have sacrificed so much more, because just to be able to serve their country, they've had to lie and make up fake pictures and fake names, and it's just ridiculous. And so that's why we really feel like that we need to fight this fight. we're 50 years behind our civil rights movement. We're just now allowed to serve in the military, and we still can't get married. And, you know, segregation in the military ended in the late 40s. Interracial marriage was not, you know, it's not kosher to say that you can't get married anymore in the late 60s. And here we are 50 years, a half a century later, we're fighting for these same civil rights.
What was that mental, emotional process like for you when you guys realized you were in love, you wanted to advance, but yet you're still in the military? How do I deal with those?
You know, I mean, nobody could understand what it's like to send somebody off to war. Josh and I had to, there's two things we had to do. First thing is that we had to have my parents pull up because he dropped us off at the drill hall before we left. And my parents had to pull behind a crane and hide our minivan there so I could hug Josh goodbye. And that just feels so humiliating to you. You know, you're saying goodbye. This could be our last goodbye to each other. We love each other. This could be our last goodbye. Our emotions are the same as any straight emotions. So we say goodbye in humiliation behind this crane as my parents looked on, and you just feel like this is just so wrong. Then at the airport, because I got to see him on leave right before we actually shipped out for Iraq, all the soldiers were there greeting their families. They were hugging. The spouses were all together, and they were saying, you know, here's my phone number. I know we're going to have to go through this. It's going to be really hard. Josh and I hid behind an escalator, and we were sitting there bawling together, saying goodbye, worrying that somebody might see two guys crying, and how do we explain that? And it's just such an additional burden of stress that nobody can ever understand. So, I mean, when we got married on our leave, you know, I could have still gotten kicked out. Don't ask, don't tell, had not been repealed. But we got married. I knew that they weren't pursuing it anymore. And it was terrifying when I came back to Iraq and they said, oh, you know, we're going to fight to kick you people out. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. That just doesn't seem fair. After 24 years of devotion to my country and giving everything that I can for the military, that just didn't seem right. And I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do it anonymously at first, but I thought this question needs to be asked. People need to see that we are over there fighting for our country right now. They need to see that. That's what happened, basically. So it's hard. It's very, very hard. It's a long-winded answer. So.
Where are you from in Ohio?
Originally from Upper Sandusky, but we live in Columbus. That's where our home is. Us and our two dogs and our cat.
Can we get an update on the signature drive? How far along are you? Are you halfway there, 3/4, 1/3? Some kind of rough idea at least?
Well, you know, we've been in the field collecting signatures for a good part of a year, and I can tell you that every day we continue to gather more signatures, especially on the weekends. We have been collecting in every part of the state. Yesterday, people were in Cincinnati. I was up in Lorain County. You know, this past weekend, people were in Athens County, and up at Bowling Green, and in Lucas County. So, although I'm not going to give you any particular numbers, I can tell you that we have signatures from each of the 88 counties. We have volunteers in each of the 88 counties, and that we are continuing to amass more signatures all the time.
Is your goal still to be on the ballot this year?
The decision about being on the ballot will be made at the appropriate time based on the number of signatures that we've collected, based on the polling numbers, which are just looking better and better all the time. And so excited to see the recent Washington Post poll with poll numbers showing over 50% of the people in Ohio, even before a campaign has begun, favor marriage equality, and some outstanding poll numbers nationwide showing in the 70 percentiles the number of people that understand that DOMA is discrimination and don't believe that it belongs in American society. And then, you know, of course, we'll assess it in terms of the finances to make sure that we have a winning campaign. So we'll be sure to let you know, Bill, when we make the decision.
Yeah, can you tell us how confident are you that you would, I understand that the decision isn't just based on whether or not you have enough signatures, but how confident are you that you will have enough signatures by July that you could go to the ballot this year?
We can do that. I mean, you know, we have a great team working on the signatures. We have such a wonderful leadership in our campaign with Ian James and Stephen Letourneau, who are experts at this petition gathering business and who have committed substantially to help us obtain this goal. And so we have the infrastructure, we have the knowledge and the ability, we have the volunteers. We can get the number of signatures needed, but we'll make the decision overall. We'll consult with the steering committee and get their advice, and I'm glad that we have strong leadership on the steering committee as well, and on our executive committee, and but I'm very excited at the momentum that this campaign has been showing, and the people that are endorsing, the organizations that are endorsing, the volunteers that have joined it. It just gets stronger every single day.
Steve, could you talk a little bit about, besides your endorsement of this proposed ballot issues, is there something in particular you're going to be doing in support of getting the signatures or selling it to Ohioans in particular?
I mean, we're basically, Josh and I right now are involved in so many initiatives. One of the initiatives that we're involved in is that we're taking couples, 25 couples, that cannot get married legally here and driving them to Washington to the Supreme Court to get married in front of the Supreme Court. To basically, number one, make a statement, but number two, to show that in 2013, this is how we're treated as second-class citizens. So we're already doing tons of initiatives like that. We're going to do, I'm a soldier. 24 years I've been fighting for rights, to have everybody have equal rights in America. So this is just a natural extension for me to want to fight for my rights, for the first time my rights, and I'm going to do that. It's going to be working with Freedom Ohio. It's going to be working with our personal initiatives. We're just going to keep up whatever we can do to raise awareness so people understand where we're at.
So these are Ohio couples you're going to take to Washington?
Let me have Josh talk a little bit about this, because
initially the idea was that it would be Ohio couples, but it went a little viral. So it spans to Michigan, Illinois, Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia right now. So 5 states outside of Ohio, but a large majority are Ohioans. We launched last Thursday, Valentine's Day, and we're already about full. I think we may have, last I checked, 4 seats left. So it's really exciting. It was just kind of an idea that I thought was great, that would inspire people to get married when they wanted to instead of when they felt like they were allowed to. There's this odd kind of mindset, when you live in a state where marriage equality isn't observed, that you kind of forget that you can still get married. You know what I mean? You sit there. When Stephen and I asked for the exception for our marriage license in Washington, D.C., because there's a 3-day waiting period, a prime example of the mindset that you're in is I called and I said, well, my spouse is an active duty service member. It's Monday. There's 3 days waiting, so we'd have to be back by Friday, but he leaves 6 a.m. for Iraq. Can we still get married? And the woman on the phone said, yeah, of course. And she said, yeah, the judge should approve that. That should be no problem. You can get an expedited license. And I hung up, and I told Stephen, and I was very excited, and I said, oh, I didn't tell her we were gay. And so I called back, and I told the woman, I said, I forgot to tell you that I'm gay. Is that okay still? And she laughed at me, and she says, yeah, that's fine. So there's this mindset that you think because it's not legal in Ohio, it's just not accessible to you, period. And so a lot of couples have been together. Right now, we're surveying the couples, and 10 of them have been spoken to, and we're already over 100 years of commitment on these couples. So that's an average of 10. And I'll tell you that a large majority of them are like 15 years plus together. So these are couples that have been together that long and still haven't had the chance to marry because they felt like it wasn't available to them. And the minute you put something like this to them, people are flocking and they realize, I can get married today. I can marry the person that I love now instead of waiting. And it feels good.
Just to be clear, you said something about the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
You're going to go to the steps of the Supreme Court or outside the Supreme Court and have...
The public space. I don't want to say the steps, but yes, the public space.
Public space.
Yeah,
just to make the point that you can't do this in Ohio, but you can do it in D.C.
In D.C. And at that time, DOMA will actually probably have either just been decided, the two cases that are coming through, or will be in the midst of decision and coming out very shortly. So it's in June 21st is when we're doing it, and then they're kind of having a weekend here in Columbus, but it should be very exciting.